All right, welcome back. Today is part 3 of our RBT practice exam, where I'm going through a full practice exam, question by question, walking you through each, as how I think about it as a BCBA and how I think you should think about it on test day. Okay, so if you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe. I have new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then one on the weekends. If you need our practice materials or study materials, check out our website or check out one of these links, which I will put in the description and comments below. We offer practice exams, study guides, flashcards, and then our combo has everything included. Any questions, reach out, email, leave a comment. I'll answer it as quickly as I can. Other than that, keep studying hard and let's get into it. So we're starting on question 21. Okay, we already did the first two parts were questions 1 through 20. So we will start with 21 today. 21, you were told to observe mouthing behavior by your client. You record the first instance of mouthing after 10 minutes, second instance after 15 minutes, and the third instance after 30 minutes. What is the average inter-response time? Okay, so first things first with this question, you have to understand what inter-response time is. That's what you're looking for, okay? And you're looking for the average inter-response time. This is a very typical measurement question you may see on the exam, which is why I stress your terms and your definitions, learning those, being fluent in these terms, okay? Because if you don't know what inter-response time is, right, this question becomes a lot more difficult. So inter-response time is the time in between two behaviors. So you have behavior 1 and behavior 2. The time in between those is inter-response time. And then 2 and 3, inter-response time, okay? So your first behavior happened after 10 minutes. So there's no inter-response time yet, right? Because this is the first instance. From behavior 1 to behavior 2, 5 minutes occurred. And then from behavior 2 to behavior 3, 15 minutes occurred, okay? So your total inter-response time was 20. To get the average, okay, you divide it by how many inter-response times there were, which is 2, and you get 10, okay? You have to understand that. You have to understand what inter-response time is, and you have to understand how to get an average, okay? So do that question a few times. Make sure you understand what you're looking at. All right, 22. What occurs right before the behavior? Easy question. Look, not all the questions are hard, okay? They're going to put some difficult ones on there, but if you study, okay, the test can be pretty easy, right? So not all questions are hard. So when you get an easy question, you want to be able to answer it very quickly so you can move on, okay, and save yourself time, save yourself mental energy for the harder ones. So this question is very easy and one you should fly through. So what occurs right before the behavior? It's an antecedent, it's a consequence, it's a corrective feedback, or is it the behavior? Obviously not the behavior, right? It's not a consequence because that comes after. Corrective feedback is a consequence. So it clearly has to be antecedent. What occurs right before the behavior? An antecedent. Okay. An alternate version of this test, I have motivating operation as one of the answer choices. Okay. But that's pretty tricky because motivating operations do occur before. Okay. But there's not always a motivating operation, right? We always have an SD, a response, and a behavior. Motivating operations would always occur. But there is always an antecedent. So in that case, you're picking the best answer, which is antecedent. Okay. What occurs right before the behavior? An antecedent. All right. Question 23. You're working with the client in home and suspect abuse is occurring. What should you do? So you're working with your client, doing your service, and you start to think something might be going on where either verbal abuse is going on, physical abuse, whatever it might be. Okay. What is your responsibility as an RBT? A, report it to your supervisor and the appropriate authorities. You're a mandated reporter. Yes. Okay. We're mandated reporters. Okay. If you think abuse is going on, immediately report it to your supervisor. Okay. And then together, you should report it to the appropriate authorities, right? We are mandated by law to report suspected abuse. Okay. B, nothing, it isn't your business. 99% of the time, things that occur in the home are not your business outside of what you're doing with your client. However, abuse is. Okay, you're a mandated reporter. C, report it to just your BCBA and let them handle it. No, right? You're mandated, so you should go to them. Okay. And then from there, you both can go to the authorities, or you can, right? Now you want to be sure, obviously, right? If you're not sure, that's a different story. Okay. But if you're positive, right, then you have to report it. Okay. And then call the police immediately. No, right? That's not the proper avenues. Okay. The proper way to handle this is report it to your supervisor and the appropriate authorities. Okay. You are a mandated reporter. Question 24. Which of the following would be the best way to fade reinforcement from thickest schedule to thinnest schedule? So this is a difficult question, okay? When we talk about fading reinforcement, we're talking about fading from a very thick schedule of reinforcement, which is a lot of reinforcement, okay, for less effort, to a thin schedule, okay, which is a lot of effort for a little reinforcement, okay? And, right, a thicker schedule is typically fixed, okay, because it's predictable. As we thin it out, we want to go to variable schedules, okay, because we want it to be unpredictable, right? That increases responding, okay? So what is the best way based on these basic reinforcement schedules, thickest to thinnest? That's what we're looking for. A, fixed ratio, variable interval, fixed interval. Well, this is out, right? Because going from a variable interval to a fixed interval is not fading, right? That's the opposite, okay? You're actually thickening the schedule if you go from a variable interval to a fixed interval. Remember, variable is typically more thin than a fixed schedule. B, fixed interval, fixed ratio, variable ratio, okay? Better, right? Because we are going from fixed to variable, right? But ideally, you're going to start with an FR for a thick schedule, fade it maybe to a time schedule, and then go to variable, right? So this is better, but do we have an even better choice than this? Okay. VI, FI, FR, this is the same issue as A, where we're going from a variable to a fixed, okay? This is actually going backwards, right? We're actually going from thinnest to thickest. And then D, FR, FI, VR. Yes, this is the best answer here to fade from a thick to thin schedule, from a fixed ratio to a fixed interval to a variable ratio. Remember, a variable ratio, the slot machine effect, is the strongest reinforcement, basic reinforcement schedule there is. Okay. So if this answer didn't exist, then technically you could pick B. Okay. But D is ultimately the best answer here and the best way to go from thick to thin schedules of reinforcement. All right. You're trying to gain compliance with your client. You decide to give them 3 easy requests in a row and then follow it up with a harder task. What are you trying to do? Okay, so your client is having a tough day, or you're new to your client, or you're trying to teach a new skill, and you have to gain compliance some way. Okay, so you tell them clap your hands, touch your nose, touch your head. What's 2 plus 2? Okay, so 3 easy requests and a harder task. What are you doing? Are you prompting the behavior? Are you gaining momentum? Are you shaping the behavior? Or are you reinforcing the behavior? Well, if you noticed, what I did was 3 or 4 completely unrelated behaviors, right? Clapping, nose touching, okay, touching their head, and then addition. So we're not shaping anything here. So C is out, okay? 2 plus 2 was my behavior, my flick behavior, right? My hard task. But did I do anything to prompt 2 plus 2? No, I just delivered the SD. So A is out. Did we reinforce anything in this scenario? Is there reinforcement going on? Are we adding anything after the behavior occurs? No. Okay. So what are you doing here? You're gaining behavior momentum. High probability request sequence. Okay. High P, low P. There's a high probability of them engaging in the easy request. Okay. So you give them a bunch of those, and then you try to increase the chances of them engaging in the low probability request. Okay. So you're gaining behavior momentum. Very powerful in ABA, and as an RBT, you should be using this, okay, often. All right, difficult question. This is an ethics question, okay? You're working with a client in an adult group home. Your client is a heavy drinker who wants to quit drinking. With your help, your BCBA develops a behavior contract stating that your client will not have more than 3 drinks per week for the next month. Your client upholds his end of the contract for the first 2 weeks. On the third week, your client expresses he wants out of the behavior contract and is going to have 4 drinks that night. What should you do? So ethically, this is what they're asking you. Ethically, what should you do in this situation? Okay, you signed a contract, a behavior contract, okay, with your client. Okay, they're not going to drink and they earn their reinforcement. They now want to break the contract. What do you do? Do you report your client to your supervisor and terminate services? No, this is not grounds for terminating services and abandoning the client. Okay, abandoning a reinforcement schedule or quitting a reinforcement contract is not grounds, okay, for terminating services. B, recommend to the client to continue with the contract, but it is ultimately their choice. Yes, right. It's an adult group home. They have the right to drink. They're allowed to drink. Okay, it's their choice. Yes, you have a behavior contract. Okay, but it's their choice. If they don't adhere to the contract, well, they don't get the reinforcement. Ultimately, as adults, okay, it's their choice, right? So this is something to consider as your clients get older, right? When you're young, a lot of your life is dictated, okay, by parents and therapists, things like that. Especially when you have disabilities, it seems to happen more often than not, where more of your life is dictated, okay? But when they become adults, right, they have adult rights, okay? They have the right to choose to engage in certain practices, okay? And you might know it's not the right things in RBT, but it's still their choice. So if your client wants to break the contract and have drinks, you recommend they continue, but ultimately it is his choice. Always read all the answer choices. C, check your client into a rehab facility. No, it's not necessary at this time. It's not, not your scope. D, prevent your client from drinking. They're not allowed to per the contract. They are not allowed to per the contract. That is correct, but you cannot prevent your client from drinking. Okay, so you can recommend they don't drink, but ultimately it is their choice. Okay, 27. All of the following are examples of continuous measurement, except what? So, what is continuous measurement? If you have my study guide, okay, you should be able to picture it right there at the top, okay? The 5 types of continuous measurement we list, okay? And if you've been studying that study guide, you should be able to rattle them off quickly, right? Continuous measurement is frequency, rate, duration, latency, and IRT, okay? Those are our 5 continuous measurements we talk about. Continuous measurement occurs throughout the session for the entire session. Which of these is not one of those that I just said? Well, what about interval recording? What is interval recording? Well, that's time sampling. That's our whole interval, partial interval, momentary time sampling. Okay? That is a discontinuous measurement. You're only measuring behavior for a set amount of time, not the entire duration of the session. Okay? So again, if you have my study guide, you can picture it, right? You have continuous measurement and your discontinuous measurement. Okay? So super easy question. If you've been studying, okay, and you know your terms. One of those easy questions you should fly through on the exam, okay? Don't get hung up on the easy ones. I'm telling you. All right, 28. You say 1, 2, your client says 3. You then say, Old MacDonald had a, your client says R. What are you working on? Well, they've listed a bunch of verbal operants, okay? Verbal behavior. We have echoics, text, interverbals, and mans. So, A, what is an echoic? An echoic is when your client repeats what you say. Is that happening here? Well, you're saying 1, 2, they said 3. You said, Old MacDonald had a, they said farm. So no, they're not repeating you, right? What are they doing? Well, they're answering you, okay? So it's not echoics. Tax, that is labeling. Is your client labeling anything? No, again, they're responding to you, they're answering you. Interverbals, yes, right? Interverbals is like a conversation, right? They're responding to you, okay? What's your name? Bill. That's an interverbal, okay? You eat with a spoon. That's an interverbal, right? They're answering, okay? Or they're responding or they're communicating with you, okay? Those are interverbals, right? In very simplistic terms, but that's all you really need to understand for the RBT exam, okay? And then mans, what are mans? Mans are just requests. Are they requesting anything? No, right? Again, they're just responding to you. They're communicating with you. Okay. You are teaching interverbals. That's the basis of verbal behavior that you need to know for the RBT exam. You don't need to go deeper than that. Okay. All right. 29. You're about to start a session with a client. What do you need to do to be sure you're ready to have a successful session at the very minimum? Okay. So you're going to session, right? You're either driving in your, well, say you're driving in your car, or you're about to arrive at session. You're not at session yet. Okay. You haven't gotten to the house or the clinic yet. What do you need to do at the very minimum? A, text your BCBA before every session to ask what you should run. No, this is unnecessary. If you watch my videos, you know communication is key. Okay. But questions like what should I run should be worked out. Okay. Either in supervision meetings, right? Or on your own time as you're working with the client. Okay. You don't need to be texting for a plan every single session. Okay. B, you should conduct a functional behavior assessment and a preference assessment. Again, not necessary to do every session. Okay. You don't need to do FBAs every session. Preference assessments, depending on the client, okay, you might need to do, but doing a full behavioral assessment, not necessary. C, read session notes from the previous session. Yes, right? This is especially true if you work on a team with more than one RBT, okay? You need to be aware of what's going on outside of your sessions. Okay? What happened before, what happened the previous session, was anything new introduced, anything new mastered, any new behaviors. So at the minimum, you should be reading these session notes from the previous session. Even if you're the only one on the case, okay, you want to refresh yourself. Okay, what did I do yesterday? What is our goals today, etc. And then D, show up to every session with new potential reinforcers. Not necessary. I mean, some people like to show up with new toys and games and stuff, which is cool. It's great, right? But it's not necessary. Okay. All right, question 30. Data collected should be all of the following except what? Okay. So there's 3 rules we need to live by when collecting data. What are those rules? Data needs to be valid. Data needs to be reliable. Data needs to be accurate, okay? Approved is not one of our data rules, okay? Data should be valid, meaning you're measuring what you intend to measure, okay? So if you're supposed to be measuring time spent in chair, okay, you need to be measuring time spent in chair. That makes the data valid. Reliable data means every time you conduct measurement, you're measuring the same thing, right? So you're not, if you're measuring seat or in-seat behavior, data that is reliable, you're measuring the same behavior the same way every single time, okay? And then accurate data means it's correct, okay? You might be measuring the same thing every time. You might be doing it the same way every time and collecting the same data every time, but you might be doing it wrong, making it inaccurate. So data collected should be all of these: valid, reliable, and accurate. Approved is not one of those. Okay, so that's 21 through 30. That's part 3. I hope you enjoyed. Keep studying. Any questions or comments, leave them below. Okay, like and subscribe. Remember, study materials available on my website or from the links below. As always, keep at it. Okay, you can do it. Hard work's going to pay off. If you're really struggling, let me know. I can help you any way I can. Okay. Other than that, I'll see you next time.